When we think of heart-healthy fats, we think of olive oil, the Mediterranean diet, the golden liquid pressed from fruit, the oleic acid that researchers have linked to cardiovascular health, to cholesterol regulation, to the longevity of populations who consume it daily. Olive oil has become synonymous with dietary virtue. It is expensive, it is celebrated, it is the benchmark against which other fats are measured. The assumption is that this fat profile belongs to the Mediterranean, to olives, to the groves that line hillsides across Spain and Italy and Greece. The infrastructure, the pressing, the bottling, the export, has been built around this single source for centuries. But there is a tuber. It grows underground, producing small, wrinkled nodules the size of chickpeas. It thrives in poor soil, in drought, in conditions that defeat most crops. It has been eaten by humans for at least 4,000 years. Specimens have been recovered from ancient Egyptian tombs, placed alongside the dead as food for the afterlife. The tuber is called Chufa. It contains oleic acid, the same monounsaturated fat that makes olive oil valuable. A root vegetable, something that should be starchy, that should be carbohydrate-dense, producing fats that nutritional science associates with tree fruits and pressed oils. The tuber also contains more fiber than almost any food commonly consumed. It feeds gut bacteria. It does not spike blood sugar despite tasting sweet. And in most of the world, it is classified as a weed. Farmers spray it with herbicide. Agricultural agencies issue warnings about its spread. The same plant that pharaohs were buried with is now eradicated as a pest. The question is not whether this tuber is nutritious. The archaeological record and the laboratory analysis agree. The question is how a food this ancient, this unusual, this metabolically valuable became something we pay to destroy. The tombs tell the story first. When archaeologists excavated burial sites along the Nile, they found the expected treasures: gold, pottery, preserved organs in canopic jars. They also found food, bread, dried fruit, and small wrinkled tubers, desiccated but recognizable, placed in vessels near the bodies. The Egyptians buried their dead with provisions for the afterlife. The foods they chose were not random. They were significant, staples that the deceased had valued in life and would need in death. The presence of these tubers in tombs dating back over 4,000 years suggests something important about their status. This was not foraged emergency food. This was deliberate cultivation. This was a crop. The pattern extends beyond Egypt. Across North Africa, archaeological evidence places this tuber in ancient diets from the Mediterranean coast to the Sahel. The plant grew wild in many regions, but it was also cultivated, selected, propagated, harvested with intention. The tubers were dried for storage, ground into flour, soaked and pressed into liquid. The uses were diverse. The plant was versatile. The Greeks knew it. Theophrastus mentioned a plant matching this description, growing in wet and marshy areas, producing edible underground portions. Dioscorides, whose pharmaceutical texts shaped European medicine for centuries, documented similar plants with nutritional and medicinal applications. The classical Mediterranean world was aware of this tuber, even if it never achieved the status of wheat or olives. The Arab expansion carried the knowledge further. As Islamic civilization spread across North Africa and into the Iberian Peninsula, food traditions traveled with it. The tuber arrived in what is now Spain, where it would find its most enduring home. The climate suited it, the soil accommodated it, and crucially, the culture that brought it understood how to use it. The Spanish adapted the tuber to their own purposes. In the Valencia region, the plant became central to a distinctive tradition. The tubers were harvested, dried, and soaked. They were ground and pressed, producing a milky liquid sweetened with sugar and flavored with cinnamon. This drink became embedded in regional identity, sold by street vendors, consumed at festivals, passed down through generations. The tradition continues today, unbroken for centuries. But this persistence was local. While one region of Spain maintained the knowledge, the rest of Europe forgot. The tuber did not enter the canon of European staple crops. It did not travel to the Americas with colonizers seeking to replicate Old World agriculture. It remained a curiosity, known in Valencia, obscure everywhere else. The African traditions persisted as well, but invisibly. In parts of West Africa, the tuber continued to be cultivated and consumed. It appeared in markets, it was prepared in traditional ways. But these food systems did not export. They did not influence global agriculture. They remained local, sustained by communities that valued what colonial food systems did not recognize. The historical record is clear. For millennia, across multiple continents, this tuber was cultivated, processed, and eaten by human populations. It was placed in tombs. It was documented by physicians. It was transformed into a regional specialty that survives to the present day. The plant was not marginal, it was established. Something happened to change its status. Something transformed a food buried with pharaohs into a weed that farmers poison. The transformation was not sudden, it accumulated. The first problem was categorization. The plant that produces these tubers belongs to a family that includes some of the world's most troublesome agricultural weeds. The sedges, grass-like plants that thrive in wet conditions, are notorious for invading cultivated fields. They spread aggressively. They resist control. They compete with cash crops for water and nutrients. When European agriculture began systematizing plant classification, this tuber was grouped with its weedy relatives. The categorization was botanical, not culinary. The fact that humans had eaten the tubers for 4,000 years was less relevant than the fact that the plant behaved like an invasive species when it appeared uninvited in farmers' fields. The logic was agricultural, not nutritional. A plant that spreads underground, producing hundreds of tubers that can each generate new plants, is difficult to manage. Once established, it resists removal. Tillage spreads the tubers rather than eliminating them. Chemical control requires repeated applications. For farmers growing crops that need clean fields, the plant was a problem regardless of whether its tubers were edible. The classification stuck. Agricultural extension services across the United States and much of Europe listed the plant among noxious weeds. Farmers were taught to recognize it, to report it, to eliminate it before it spread. The knowledge that the tubers were nutritious, the knowledge that ancient civilizations had cultivated this plant deliberately, was not transmitted. The plant was a pest. That was what farmers needed to know. The second problem was processing. The tubers are not ready to eat when harvested. They are hard, dense, and fibrous. They require preparation, soaking, drying, grinding, before they become palatable. The traditional methods that developed over millennia accomplish this effectively, but they require time and knowledge. Industrial food processing favors simplicity. The crops that became global commodities were crops that could be processed at scale with minimal labor. Wheat could be milled. Corn could be ground or processed into starch, syrup, and oil. Potatoes could be sliced and fried. Each of these crops entered industrial supply chains because the processing was straightforward. This tuber did not fit the model. The steps required to transform hard, dried nodules into food, soaking for hours, grinding with specialized equipment, pressing and straining, did not scale easily. No factory infrastructure developed. No processing industry emerged. The tuber remained artisanal in the regions where it was used and unknown everywhere else. The third problem was storage. Fresh tubers are perishable. They contain moisture and oils that can go rancid. Traditional preservation involved thorough drying, which stabilized the tubers for months, but required appropriate conditions. Industrial supply chains expected products that could be stored indefinitely in warehouses, shipped across oceans, and sold months after harvest. Dried tubers could theoretically meet these requirements, but the market never developed. Without demand, there was no investment in storage infrastructure. Without storage infrastructure, there was no way to aggregate production for export. Without export, there was no incentive for farmers to cultivate a crop that their own agricultural agencies classified as a weed. The fourth problem was competition. By the 20th century, the global food system had consolidated around a small number of staple crops. Wheat, rice, corn, and potatoes dominated. These crops received research funding. They received breeding programs. They received subsidies and price supports and marketing campaigns. They became so dominant that alternatives became invisible. The tuber could not compete. It produced food under conditions that would defeat wheat or corn. It offered nutritional profiles that other crops could not match. But these advantages were irrelevant without infrastructure, without processing capacity, without a market willing to pay for something unfamiliar. The plant continued growing. It spread through irrigation ditches and along riverbanks. It colonized disturbed soil and abandoned fields. It appeared wherever conditions suited it, indifferent to human classifications. The tubers it produced were as nutritious as they had ever been. No one harvested them. No one ate them. The system did not suppress the plant. The system simply organized itself around different crops, and the plant, lacking any economic defender, was reclassified as an enemy. The nutritional analysis, when researchers conducted it, complicated the simple story of a weed. The fat content was the first surprise. Root vegetables are not supposed to contain significant fat. Potatoes are starchy. Carrots are fibrous. Beets are sugary. The macronutrient profile of underground foods follows a pattern. Carbohydrates dominate, with minimal fat and moderate protein. This tuber broke the pattern. The fat content ranges from 20 to 30% by dry weight, extraordinary for something growing underground. More significantly, the fat is predominantly oleic acid, the same monounsaturated fatty acid that makes olive oil nutritionally valuable. A tuber growing in poor soil, producing the fat profile of a Mediterranean tree fruit. The finding challenged assumptions about where dietary fats could come from. The fiber content was the second surprise. The tuber contains more fiber than most foods in the modern diet, both soluble and insoluble forms, at concentrations that dwarf typical vegetables and grains. A significant portion of this fiber is resistant starch, which passes through the small intestine undigested and feeds bacteria in the colon. The prebiotic effect is substantial. Gut bacteria ferment the resistant starch, producing short-chain fatty acids that nourish the intestinal lining. The process supports the populations of beneficial microbes that modern research has linked to immune function, metabolic health, and even mental well-being. The tuber provides what the microbiome needs in quantities that most modern foods cannot match. The glycemic response was the third surprise. The tuber tastes sweet. It contains natural sugars that traditional preparations like the Spanish drink emphasize. But the fiber matrix slows absorption. Blood sugar rises gradually rather than spiking. For a food that tastes like a treat, the metabolic impact is remarkably gentle. The combination is unusual. High fat, high fiber, low glycemic impact, natural sweetness. Each of these characteristics is valuable individually. Finding them together in a single food, especially a food that grows without irrigation, without fertilizer, without the inputs that modern agriculture demands, is biochemically unusual. The mineral profile reinforces the picture. Magnesium, potassium, phosphorus, and iron are present in meaningful quantities. Vitamin E accompanies the fats. The nutritional density is high relative to the calories, particularly compared to the refined starches and sugars that dominate modern diets. And then there is the matter of the milk. The tuber can be soaked, ground, and pressed to produce a liquid that functions like milk. The product contains no lactose, no casein, no whey, none of the compounds that make dairy problematic for many consumers. It also contains no tree nuts, making it safe for people with nut allergies, a milk alternative that avoids the common allergens while providing fiber, healthy fats, and minerals. The traditional Spanish drink had achieved this centuries before plant-based milk became a market category. The agricultural resilience adds another dimension. The plant tolerates drought. It grows in sandy, poor soil. It produces abundantly with minimal inputs. The same characteristics that make it weedy, aggressive spreading, underground propagation, tolerance of disturbed conditions, make it remarkably productive for anyone who chooses to cultivate it intentionally. In a world facing water scarcity and soil degradation, a crop that produces exceptional nutrition under marginal conditions warrants attention. The plant does not require the infrastructure that industrial agriculture has built. It requires only someone willing to grow it. Some cultivators have begun doing exactly this. In Spain, commercial production continues, supplying the traditional drink market. In parts of Africa, cultivation is expanding as development organizations recognize the tuber's potential. Small farms in Europe and North America have started growing it for specialty markets. The scale remains tiny, but the direction has shifted. The irony is not lost on researchers studying the plant. The qualities that made it a weed, resilience, spread, persistence, are qualities that food security experts now seek. The plant that agricultural systems spent decades trying to eliminate may be precisely what stressed agricultural systems need. But the infrastructure has not changed. The classification remains. The research funding remains minimal. The processing capacity remains artisanal. The gap between what the plant offers and what the system recognizes has not closed. The plant is called Chufa. In English, it is sometimes called tiger nut, though it is not a nut, and the stripes on the tuber are faint when present at all. In Spanish-speaking regions, it is Chufa, or horchata nut, named for the drink it produces. In parts of Africa, local names vary by language and region, but the plant is the same. It grows in Valencia still, cultivated in the sandy soils that line the coast. The harvest happens in late autumn, when the tubers have matured underground. Farmers use specialized equipment, modified potato harvesters, to lift the soil and separate the tubers. The small wrinkled nodules are washed, dried in the sun, and stored for processing. The drink remains popular. Horchata de Chufa appears in cafes and street stalls across Valencia. It is served cold, often with fartons, long sugar-dusted pastries meant for dipping. Tourists seek it out. Locals consume it routinely. The tradition that began centuries ago, when Arab farmers brought the tuber to Iberia, continues without interruption. Outside Spain, recognition is slower. Health food stores in some countries carry the dried tubers, sold as snacks or ingredients. The flour appears in gluten-free baking applications. The oil, cold-pressed from the tubers, is marketed as a specialty product, comparable to olive oil but less well known. For those who wish to try the tuber, identification is straightforward. The dried nodules are small, wrinkled and brown, resembling shriveled chickpeas or unusually large raisins. They are hard when dry, requiring soaking before eating. Once soaked, they become softer and sweeter, with a flavor often compared to almonds or coconut. They can be eaten directly, blended into milk, or ground into flour. Growing the plant is simple in suitable climates. The tubers are planted in spring, in loose, well-draining soil. The plant produces grass-like foliage above ground while spreading tubers below. Harvest occurs in fall, after the foliage dies back. The yield is substantial. A single plant can produce dozens of tubers. The challenge is not production. The challenge is preventing the plant from spreading where it is not wanted. In regions where the plant is classified as a weed, cultivation is complicated. Some jurisdictions prohibit planting, concerned about agricultural contamination. Gardeners who grow it must contain the spread. The tension between food production and weed control remains unresolved. The tubers themselves do not care about classification. They grow where conditions permit. They produce what they have always produced: the unusual fats, the exceptional fiber, the nutrients that sustained populations for millennia. They wait underground, as they waited beneath the sands where pharaohs were buried, as they waited in the fields where farmers now spray herbicide. The knowledge was not lost. It survived in Valencia, in African villages, in the communities that never stopped cultivating what the global system dismissed. The knowledge is available to anyone who seeks it. The tuber is available as well. It grows in specialty farms and home gardens. It appears in natural food markets and online suppliers. It can be ordered, planted, harvested, and eaten using methods that have not fundamentally changed in 4,000 years. The food buried with pharaohs still grows. It produces the same fats, the same fiber, the same gentle sweetness that ancient peoples valued. The tombs have been excavated, the contents have been catalogued, the tubers that accompanied the dead to the afterlife have been analyzed and understood. The plant does not require this understanding. It continues regardless. It spreads underground where conditions allow. It produces its strange, wrinkled nodules filled with oil and fiber and resistant starch. In the fields where it is poisoned, it returns. In the gardens where it is cultivated, it thrives. The system that classified it as a weed may change. The research may eventually match the archaeology. The market may eventually recognize what the pharaohs already knew. Or not. The plant is patient. It has been patient for 4,000 years. It can wait a while longer.